So World Refugee Day is an international day designated by the United Nations to honour refugees around the globe. It falls each year on June 20th and celebrates the strength and courage of people who've been forced to flee their home. Each year it has a different theme, and this year is whoever, wherever, whenever, everyone has the right to seek safety.
And if you're around, there's a lot of community events happening. So if you are interested, join one of the events to celebrate and see the courage and successful people from refugee backgrounds doing in our community in New Zealand.
Welcome to the Smooth Brain Society podcast. Have you ever come across something and thought, I'm not smart enough for this? We think the fault lies with those who present information in ways which are hard to understand. In an attempt to change this, we'll be speaking to researchers, experts, and all-round wrinkly-brained individuals, improving our understanding of a broad range of topics which are rooted in psychology. Join us as we try to develop ourselves one brain fold at a time.
Please note that the Smooth Brain Society podcast is distinct from the Herenga Waka Victoria University of Wellington. The views expressed on this show are those of our guests, presenters, and affiliates alone, and we assume no liability for the application of the information discussed. We also take no responsibility for any change in brain folds on part of the audience. Viewer discretion is advised. Now on to the podcast.
Welcome back to the Smooth Brain Society. I am Sahid, and today Olivia is not with me, but we have a new co-host in Louisa Gucci with a B. Louisa Gucci, care to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yes, so it's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Louisa. I am doing my Master's in Cross-Cultural Psychology. My thesis is about the impacts of the border restrictions on migrant mental health during the COVID pandemic. And I'm also a student in the clinical psychology program. So I'm originally from Brazil, and I've been living in Aotearoa for 6 years now. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, welcome. And hopefully you come and co-host with me more often as well.
I hope so too.
All right. Our actual episode today is on account of World Refugee Day. We have two guests with us, and I will introduce both of them one after the other. The first is Dr. Marieke Jasperse. She is the Senior Advisor for Trafficking in Persons for Immigration New Zealand, and prior to that has worked as a research consultant for Red Cross New Zealand. Her work has been influenced by her own doctoral research in psychological medicine, with a PhD being titled The Crisis of Representation in the Refugee Resettlement Sector in New Zealand, which talks about the issues with psychological research in resettling communities, among other things, and will help guide our discussions for today. Our other guest is Kodrean Eashae. He is from the Iraqi Assyrian community and now calls Wellington his home. He is the Refugee Backgrounds Student Advisor at Victoria University of Wellington, and he has also worked with a few non-profit organizations supporting resettlement and advocacy for refugee background communities. He is also the founder of Voice of Aroha, a fortnightly radio show broadcast on Wellington Access Radio, 106.1 FM. So welcome to the show, both of you guys. Thank you for being on.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. I'm feeling home. Going back to another radio show. That's what I want. Thank you for having us.
This is a bit of a crossover for you.
Yeah.
Maybe we should come on your show at some point.
Yeah, definitely. We will do the exchange, because that's the point of the show.
Every episode, I generally have like a quote in a different language. And for this episode, I have one in Arabic. And then Kodrean is going to absolutely roast my pronunciation after this.
You will be right. Just go for it.
All right. So, طلب اللجوء هو حق من حقوق الإنسان.
Yes. So, seeking asylum is one of the rights of the human rights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
That is correct. Thank you.
Very good. So, I thought that would be a good one for this podcast.
Absolutely.
Dr. Jasperse, or can I call you Marieke?
Of course you can call me Marieke. No one
Marieke.
else calls me doctor.
All right, Marieke. In that case, maybe we should start off there. We'll start off with how you got into this research in the first place, and a little bit about your journey.
Absolutely, sure. I guess an important aspect to share with you all in terms of, I guess, the type of research I ended up doing for my doctoral work. There's two kind of things, I guess, I would like to share. The first is why refugee resettlement? That's a question people often have for me. Ultimately, it started when I was 17 years old. I had the opportunity to visit a refugee camp along the Thai-Burmese border. And during my time there, I met another young woman who had been born in the camp, given birth in the camp, and never left the camp, and her and I were the same age. And the question she had for me was, why was I there? And that was just an incredibly powerful point in my life, an opportunity for me to acknowledge the incredible privilege that I have. And from that moment on, I really took it upon myself to get informed and involved in refugee resettlement. So I returned to New Zealand, signed up and started volunteering with what is now the Red Cross. At the time, it was Refugee Migrant Services, and started assisting resettling families in New Zealand in Wellington region. Studying cross-cultural psychology. And I guess the second thing is, through the course of studying to become a cross-cultural psychologist, cross-cultural psychology is a sub-discipline of psychology. And I guess one of the key things I took away from that was really the importance of, I guess, acknowledging the ethnocentrism that really does characterize a lot of psychology as a discipline, and really, I guess, taking time to acknowledge and be aware of the cultural context in which we often insert ourselves in our interpretations. And so, those two sorts of things, really led to the type of research I did after my master's. I then had the opportunity to work with Changemakers Refugee Forum, which is a refugee-run and led NGO here in Wellington. And during my time there, was really connected with different resettling communities and just became really aware of some of the issues of representation in the resettlement sector and some of the reluctance of local communities to participate in psychological research. And so, I basically just was inspired to do a particular kind of PhD project that would really respond to those concerns around representation and research.
That's awesome. How about you, Kodrean? Could you give us a little bit of a background on yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So, like you said, my name is Kodrean Eashae, which is the name. It's need another hour to explain where the name comes from. But I will talk you where I come from, or a little bit of my background. So I reunited with my family in 2018 as a reunification process after the ISIS events took over in 2014-15 in my country, Iraq. And I come from Assyrian community, which is Assyrian is another small ethnicities in the Middle East, which is they are indigenous people of Mesopotamia, or basically now we call it Iraq and Syria and some part of Turkey and Iran. So I'm from those people. I still speak that language of Assyrian language. And so things happened and we settled here. Was lucky because, like I said, my family come before me in 2014. Then 2018 took me 4 years to come here. Then since then, my settlement here, I've been involved into community sector, into volunteering and with a lot of organizations, because even before I come, I had my own initiative with youth. We were helping the IDPs, internally displaced people from the Mosul city, which was non-profit organization. And in New Zealand, like I said, been involved in too many until I become too many jobs, too many organizations. Now, I do work as advisor for refugee background student at Victoria University, and also I am youth advocate and community connector with Changemakers Settlement Forum, is a non-profit organization. And I sit with some other boards, which is like Kapuya, which is Royal Commission advisory group for Minister Andrew Little to oversight and look after all these recommendations that come from that report of Royal Commission. That's just advisory things, and plus some others. I don't want to take time to mention all of them, but just let me summarize it that I'm a community person, I call myself, which is that mean I would love to sit in a ground and in a policy making decisions always. So you will find me in all levels. That's where I love see myself, helping with peoples in the ground and as well as informing decision makers about best advice. What they can, yeah. So this is me.
That was great. So I think a good place to start, considering we like to start from the basics and go up, is how people define refugees. So both in terms of policy and how, with experiences, you think that that definition is correct.
Absolutely. So, according to the UNHCR, which is the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, a refugee technically is someone who is unable or unwilling to return to their country of origin, owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion. And just recently this week, the UNHCR released the latest figures, and unfortunately, the number of refugees worldwide has now surpassed 100 million.
Wow.
And so that's, I guess, the technical definitions, but I think in this context, I'd really like to pass it over to my colleague Kodrean to sort of share some of his reflections.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I think it's a very hard question. So it's come to us who have a lived experience or come from this background, because for first stage, we don't choose the name. We don't know actually what is refugee until we become refugee later. People call us, define us that you are a refugee. So it's basically when you have a sitting home in your home, just everything's cold, and you tell yourself that the country is going into war or going into some issues of ethnic cleansing, religions, all of that stuff, then you've been forced to move. So basically, it's come from something pressure, force. It's not a choice. That's where, if we can say, put it in a context of definition, it's those people who've been forced. So that forces come in different level, different shapes, different types. Okay, so a lot of issues that made those families, those people to leave their country. Then when arrive to another country, the second country, waiting somewhere to be settled in the country that they don't know where, through UNHCR, that's one way. Also, there's other ways who they come like as a family unification, sponsorship program, all of each country, what they have. Some people are lucky because they have their other cousins who've been refugees since decades or years ago. So they give them a little bit some information about the ways to come in. Can you see? So in terms of definition, in my perspective, we don't choose the name. The name being given to us, label us as a refugee. And we never know what is that refugee, because we still, even when we settle, we still have a nostalgic to the place where we come from. What we know is we seek someone to be safe. That's what we know.
In that case, it's very different to other migrants coming from countries who kind of know where they're going to be.
Absolutely.
Definitely it is, because the migrants, and here also you have to talk which migrants we are talking about, which countries they come from. There's the wealthy countries who they choose for the progress of economy and stuff. You may have some people who come from those war zone countries, they are still calling them migrant. I believe they did not come by their choice, but they just find a way to come in to survive from that. Even if you find the doctors, but because you have a little money, they come. If it was not been forced, that doctor will not leave that country and come, especially, let's say, from Iraq. You see, they are people call them migrant, no, but the system make them like that. For instance, New Zealand until 2019, there was a racist policy law there. Do you know that there was a period of refugees or people come from Middle East and Africa? It will not enter to New Zealand if they don't have first-degree family, brother and sister. And that was until 2019. Until now, I think it's removed. They will look if they will bring refugees from this area because they were considering it as a danger area. So people were trying to send them to enter another way to their loved people and to be just safe here. So I think it's very different between migrants and between refugees in too many levels, in levels of income, in levels of coming here, and also in a level of mentality thinking after they settle in the country. Do you want to add something about refugees and migrants?
I would love to add a lot of things, but I think in this context, it's really important that I don't. Yeah, but I do think it's important, and you're right, that was a really racist policy, and obviously, distinguishing between migrants and also acknowledging that, many migrants coming here technically could have been qualified as refugees or received refugee status. So, yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think, do you want to know, boring stuff around, our annual quota and all that kind of stuff, or is that not?
Do you think that's very important to be, put in?
Nah. People can Google that.
Can I just ask, from a government's perspective in Aotearoa, what is the difference in the way in refugees and migrants in terms of resettlement?
Absolutely. So I guess ultimately it does come down to this element of choice. And so the New Zealand government has made a commitment to the UNHCR to resettle an annual quota of resettling individuals every year. The annual quota is now 1,500 individuals per annum. And the government basically has quite strong provisions in place to support these individuals within their first year of arriving to Aotearoa. So, for instance, everyone spends an initial orientation period of 6 weeks at Mangere Refugee Reception Centre. And during this time, they're really given an orientation to what their life in New Zealand may look like. And they also undergo health screening, language screening, and are basically able to connect with their cohort and learn about, their new effective society of settlement. There, up until recently, were 8 centres of settlement. So Auckland, Hamilton, Palmerston North, Wellington, Nelson, Christchurch, Dunedin. Am I missing? Invercargill. Yeah, so those have been primarily the 8 centres, and at the moment the government is trialling opening up additional centres. There are a number of pilots happening in that space. But basically, resettling individuals provided with housing, and the Red Cross has the contract to basically take responsibility for providing assistance during that initial year of resettlement. And so the Red Cross has trained social workers and cross-cultural workers, and they work really closely with volunteers and interpreters to basically assist these resettling individuals and families to, recreate their new life and their new society of settlement, wherever that may be. And there are a lot of challenges associated with this. All right, just a quick correction. My colleague Kodrean has just reminded me that the Red Cross no longer is responsible for resettling individuals across the country. That actually now falls within a number of different NGOs.
So, in that case, is it almost beneficial in a way to be a refugee over a migrant coming from, as Kodrean mentioned, a lot of doctors or whatever are forced almost out of those countries, and they come over as migrants by finding other ways? Is it more beneficial to come over as a refugee then? So, based on the support?
If Marieke, you want to go first, or should I add on it?
I do feel like this is a question that you should respond to, but perhaps I can just quickly say that one of the things I'm really interested in is sort of some of the assumptions and stereotypes and stigma associated with the label of being a refugee. So as much as being awarded refugee status allows you access to certain support and provisions, there's also a high cost to that. And also it means that there's an added layer of vulnerability, because those that have a refugee-like background but had the ability to migrate often have many more resources. And so often the journey is slightly different. But again, I don't want to make gross generalizations. Over to you.
That's correct. That's right. Yeah, I think to answer to your question, it says if it's benefit, there's nothing benefit in both of them, I think. Just both of them are facing new challenges, a new country, so despite naming the name. But when you get the refugee stance, that's more harder, despite you looking at the government, helping with resettlement, with housing and all of that. But when you go into deep, you will say, what kind of these houses? How much is affordable? How much is warm? And how much is the resettlement process are really supporting them, or just leaving them in a country that by alone and without even English support as well. So that's the hard things. And like my colleague Marieke mentioned about the names, that name to follow them, and that will narrow the opportunities into employment and a lot of other stuff. While the migrant, like I say, also they have their challenges here. But at least I think one of the simple, easiest challenge for them, they at least know a little bit of English. So that's something to find their way to how to manage their system. But I think even migrants, also when they come here, they find a lot of challenge until they settle or find their way to be stable job in terms of visa and all of that kind of too much bureaucracy, I would say, in the process of visa and making them stable life. So I will just take it again that there is no benefit of being both of them. And for refugee is double challenge, just if I can clear it like that.
We know that a lot of people who come to New Zealand as refugees experience a lot of trauma. And we were just talking about the support that's in place for refugees. What does that support actually look like when it comes to dealing with trauma? Because we know that's associated with psychopathology and a lot of distress that they may experience. What does the psychological support look like?
That's a really good question. Thank you. And I guess it's such a good question to really, go into a little more detail about my PhD research because, the process of becoming and being a refugee is incredibly traumatic. However, these individuals are also incredibly resilient. And so we in the West often make a lot of assumptions about the impact of the trauma that people have experienced. And we also make a lot of assumptions about the type of support or psychological support they will require. And so that sort of dynamic and awareness of these assumptions was actually what inspired my PhD research. So in terms of my PhD, it was really about wanting to actually challenge a lot of the assumptions of psychopathology that tend to dominate discussions of refugee resettlement. So when I say psychopathology or assumptions of psychopathology, I'm referring primarily to the assumption that all resettling individuals will have post-traumatic stress disorder and that this post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, will be a product of the experiences they had before coming to New Zealand, and that in order to effectively support them, that they will require and desire specialist psychological intervention. And so this is something that I think is quite prevalent. And during my time at Changemakers Resettlement Forum, I had the opportunity to really listen to a lot of individuals and hear their frustrations about these assumptions and how a lot of people felt that they were wildly inaccurate and actually really added to their stigmatized status in society. And they felt that a lot of the NGOs or people like myself responsible for representing them were often kind of perpetuating these assumptions of trauma or using these discussions of trauma to really raise awareness around refugee resettlement and attempting to gain more recognition and resources for their clients. But they were doing it in such a way that was almost stigmatizing them on two levels, effectively reducing resettling individuals to being at risk of post-traumatic stress disorder, and then by extension, a risk to the practitioners supporting them around these constant conversations around the risks of becoming vicariously traumatized. And so one of the things I wanted to do with my PhD research was actually to, deconstruct this a little more and actually turn the emphasis away from resettling individuals and their trauma and onto resettlement agencies and practitioners to actually look at how they are representing resettling clients and their resettlement work, and to sort of combine those reflections with the latest clinical research. And sort of what came through really strongly was the fact that most resettlement practitioners really resented the stereotypes and stigma of resettling individuals throughout society, but didn't actually realize that they were part of the problem and that they were often actually perpetuating many of these assumptions. And another thing was that they weren't aware of the latest clinical research. And when we look at the latest clinical research that's been published, especially over the last sort of 5 years, we find that the majority of resettling individuals do not develop PTSD or any psychopathology. 1 in 5 refugees may have some kind of mental illness, PTSD, depression, or anxiety. And if you take a moment to consider the kinds of experiences that they have overcome, that's remarkably low. And also another thing to acknowledge in this context is that we respond to trauma in a range of ways and simultaneously. So even if you may have developed PTSD or have symptoms of PTSD, that doesn't mean you're not remarkably resilient. And it also doesn't mean that you haven't experienced positive responses to your experience. And so there's a concept in psychology, post-traumatic growth, that really kind of captures some of the positive responses people have to enduring trauma. And I think, and that has been captured in the resettlement context as well. And furthermore, there's this concept of vicarious post-traumatic growth. So instances where practitioners actually assisting resettling clients actually are vicariously, like their lives are vicariously improved by being inspired by their clients' resilience and growth. So yeah, one of the things with my research that I felt was really important was to, one, raise awareness within resettlement agencies about the responsibility they have for representing resettling refugees and the implications that that has for subsequent perceptions of resettling individuals and assumptions made about the most appropriate services to support them. And then also the fact that there are a range of responses to trauma and trauma work.
Yeah, exactly what you mentioned, Marieke. It's a lot of that important work you're doing. And coming from the background that having a lived experience from me and the other people that I work with in a community, that we have been judged by assumptions that all refugees come with a trauma. That is something, it's really big challenge for us. And that is something have made us a trauma for other people who didn't have a trauma. But because of those assumptions that refugees, they come here, they think, oh no, they have a trauma, we need to deal with them this way, that way. So that's another big challenge when you have a name being called refugee, and the assumption will come, everyone should have a psychological problems, trauma. That's not true, not everyone. We survive from these events. It's more about the resilience. It's more about the strength we bring with us. So the focus all was last years is all about the weakness. If you even have noticed it and read and write some of the posts, even recently in social media, they always look at the refugees into that kind of weak person, weak pictures, and always put this into the nation side. Always talk about the weakness, how family is really helpless, instead of to focus on the strength. So that's for the people who resettled here after that, because they got a trauma from the challenge they faced in resettlement in the country. How, for example, people come here, they are just skills people, but because they are been refugee, etc., when trying to apply for work, they've been undervalued. So this is one of them. It's when they try to apply, they are all good with English, they are all good with qualification, but the business owners or employer will always judge on them because of what they see. And who is the responsible of this is the providers, is those organizations who work with the settlement. What they are feeding into our media society here is the hopeless families, is all refugees. Of course, the skills people will be missed out in the system. So that's here we're talking other issues creating for those people trauma. I just want to highlight this because this is what's recently happened. Even people now, the listeners say, oh, I just came to the country 2018. But 4 years was enough for me to be very involved, deep dive, reading all the other before research as well. They were talking about the same issues that we still have. We are in 2022 now. We're still dealing with about representation. They're talking about where is our place? Where is our voice as refugees? Let us tell our stories by ourselves. But because some others have told it, and that is where I think agree with a lot of assumptions have been there. Misassumptions that created more barrier challenge instead they was thinking to solve that problems for refugees. which is, I can say the provider perspective or those organizations is all about carrier funding. They want to sell that story because that's here again. It's all about the system. The organizations want to sell the story, how to bring funding more to make sure the services continue helping these people. While those organizations are doing it in the wrong way to show the weak picture and to think that the service is needed and the funding need to continue. But the reality, if you show the strength, that will bring you also the funding. So the system criteria of the government need to change those boxes, what it took to give the reality of what's happening on the ground. Give the freedom to the organizations, carry out the research in a way that exactly what is happening, instead of just assume this and that. Yeah, I think I'm going to stop here and here.
No, that's amazing. And I think just to build on what you've just shared, that kind of brings us back to the title of my PhD, which was The Crisis of Representation in the Refugee Resettlement Sector in Aotearoa. And exactly what Kodrean was just sharing, it's this issue around the system and sort of how refugees are represented and the assumptions made to be able to secure funding to actually support resettling refugees, whether or not, they have PTSD or whether or not they have an interest in receiving specific kinds of support. So one of the things that I did with my PhD after my initial analysis was actually working with the Red Cross at the time to actually share all the latest clinical research with the practitioners so that they were aware that actually not all refugees suffer from these psychopathologies. And even if they do, it's not necessarily helpful to focus predominantly on them. And really just, I guess, to reiterate as well how important these issues of representation are. I think for many of us, especially for those of us who occupy quite privileged positions in society, we just have no awareness of how important representation is. And I think ultimately, as silly and as simple as it seems, how we talk about certain people, including resettling refugees, has significant implications for how others who hear us go on to think about and treat these people, and in this context, resettling individuals. And this concept really applies to anyone who occupies a marginalised status, in our society. And so, as insignificant as it may seem, it's actually incredibly important. And part of the dynamic in the sector is that there have often just been people like me, privileged Pākehā with psychological qualifications who are speaking for and on behalf of resettling individuals. And it's incredibly problematic. And, these individuals can speak for themselves. My colleague can speak for himself. And I think this is why today is so special for us, because we're able to share this space. And we really appreciate you guys giving us this opportunity and to try and change this a little.
It is. It's very, very true. And representation is very important. It changes a lot when you have the right people on the table.
Can I ask with that then, what would the next steps you think would be to improve representation? I know Kodrean works with students, so maybe in university settings, share something about your experience there.
Oh, yes, definitely. So I can talk a little bit of my experiences in this role. This role has been created in 2020. I think we saw the difference between before this role, how I was supporting for the students going, and when they decided that you need to bring a person who will be dedicated to support them as an advisor role. So I think the difference was the more engagements come over, the more detailed issues of the students we find out, which is the issues of the students. So there was just recently some students, because of a little bit 1-2 papers didn't submit with the enrollment, the students was always to give away all the year and all the study. But when I found out, I talked to the students and get them to the process, we brought the students back to enrollment. So here's a kind of, we saved the life of the students for 1 year. Instead of be missing, you don't know what to do. We actually help them in the way to find the right way and information and all of that. So what is need more? I encourage the all tertiary education or other universities to start building these such rules. I know there's a lot of more the numbers we have at Victoria, the refugee background students in Auckland University, also other universities. I would love encourage them to have dedicated support person. And also in the both way, it's a supportive. You bring a person, you're giving them job opportunity first for someone from the community. And the second thing, that person will be having knowledge, expertise in the cultural backgrounds. And when you're dealing with these students, they are equity groups on those institutions. The things happen in the world. This person will give advice for the team, for stuff, how to react when a time of crisis happen. Have you guys recently saw when things happen in Afghanistan? Despite we have those kids who grew up here, they are Afghani background, or they recently come. So that's where the role of those people as advisors come in, to how to deal with those students, how we can keep their mental health, keep their well-being going on as a support where they success in their studies. So my message is to encourage tertiary educations, giving more, and plus giving a meaningful support for these roles, not just as a person to tick the box, we have one, giving them good salary. They are listening, my managers.
Give me a pay rise.
That sounds good.
Well, the university hasn't increased my pay for 3 years, so I don't think it's going to do anything. I'm not editing that out as well. Thanks for that. That's a nice idea in terms of in a university kind of setting with young people from refugee backgrounds. But now I can broaden that to Marieke and ask how her research has been implemented through her work in the wider communities.
Oh, I wish I had an answer or that my research had that kind of impact. But, I can't claim to take credit for that. I think a lot of people have been working incredibly hard to try and raise awareness around these issues of representation and to actually really advocate for people with lived experience of having become and been a refugee and resettled in New Zealand to actually occupy positions of power on, in sort of the professions and in the rooms and in the places where significant decisions are being made around refugee resettlement and the type of support that is desired and required. And so I think also doubling back to your previous question around, support provisions for individuals who may be struggling significantly with their trauma, it's instead of just imposing Western, psychological interventions like evidence-based CBT, well, actually we know from the research that CBT isn't particularly effective for resettling individuals or other culturally diverse clients. So it's actually about working with resettling communities, with clients, and also resettling individuals becoming clinicians themselves to actually work together in collaboration to, basically create additional or alternative interventions and modes of support that communities are asking for. Because I think ultimately, as much as it's important to focus on, the small minority who struggle with significant psychopathology, at the end of the day, that's such a small section of the resettling community, and actually the support that we provide them, it's not representative of what the majority of resettling individuals actually desire or require. And so we actually have to listen to them and actually identify what their priorities are for resettlement and recovery.
But I think you touched on a very important issue as well, which is that we tend to impose our own practices and our Western way of working with individuals that may be struggling, that might not necessarily be effective for individuals that come from a certain cultural background. And so that we don't acknowledge the diversity that we're working with.
Absolutely. Yeah. So one of the things in my PhD, given that it was in psychological medicine, I attempted to address that in terms of having discussion around the clinical implications of my research. And so we know from the research that actually when it comes specifically to resettling individuals in Western contexts, those that do have PTSD and receive specialist psychological intervention, it's often only effective for 1 in 5 of these individuals. So we know we need to do better. And ultimately, one of the things I identified was that whilst as psychologists and psychiatrists, we have, code of conduct and, we're supposed to be culturally responsive in our clinical practice, if clinicians are not provided with any kind of training or education around refugee resettlement, then how are they actually in a position to be culturally responsive in their practice? And so that's something that I discussed in my PhD, and given that I did my PhD in a medical school, had the opportunity to actually talk to medical students and GPs and nurses and psychiatrists and psychologists to actually increase some of this awareness and, contribute to a greater capacity to, acknowledge the ethnocentrism inherent in their profession, in their training. And also to have some awareness so that they're actually able to take responsibility for adapting their practice to best suit their client.
There's something that I kind of want to talk about, but I don't really know how to transition to that in a kind of like smooth way. But we talked about stigma, I guess the labels that are usually associated with the term refugee and how that contributes to the views that society has on refugees. And something that has really shocked me recently was with the Ukraine war, and that was all over social media. There was a video of a journalist saying something like, these people actually look like us. Like, it's 2022 and we're seeing people that look exactly like us running away to other countries in Europe, and that just it was just so obvious to me then that we do welcome, it's the same thing with migrants as well. We do welcome refugees as long as they're white. But that was kind of like a first time in history as well that you did have a situation where you had a large group of refugees that were white going into Europe, and how open those countries actually were to receiving refugees when there was a huge crisis in Europe recently, and they're saying we can't take any more refugees, and then there was a Ukraine war, and then suddenly everyone was welcoming those people. Not to say that they shouldn't be, but the division there was really clear to me, and that's incredibly sad. But I don't know if you guys have any insights on that, or if that's something that has affected you as well. I kind of just wanted to transition to that because I think it's an important thing to talk about.
You figured the perfect segue for it, so don't worry.
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. And there is an absolute double standard in inherent racism. And I think ultimately Kodrean is best placed to reflect on that.
Yeah, I think it was, maybe shock for the world to see that. But for us, it was not a shock. Mm-hmm. We just felt it when we raised our voice, but there was no one listening to us. You see, it's very sad now. If I say this sentence, people will say, oh, why do you say that? It's very sad to see what happened in Ukraine, okay? But we can say it was good to happen so the world can see.
Yeah.
People say, oh, I'm against war. Okay, I'm against anyone, any human being, any color to be in a space of being refugee or displaced from their country. But the incidents on happening in Ukraine have taught the world a little bit to listen to the other side. That's why I look at the theme of this year of UNHCR is whoever, that's the theme, this justice raising that telling countries that whoever can be a refugee. And many times I have said before, even in other videos, in other things that they do. New Zealand, it could be end up a refugee tomorrow or after. Yeah. If let's imagine, want to be quick, hopefully not happens. So we become refugee in Australia. If just think about it, refugee, that's the thing. When something happen outside from your hand, doesn't matter what color, what religion, where you come from. So the incidents on Ukraine have showcased that how much the system is racist.
Yeah.
And based also in New Zealand, what I mentioned before about the policy that was exist about Middle East and African people to not enter to New Zealand. So it's always this, the system have made all of this, the assumptions have made all of this kind of division. That's the other problems have followed. That's where the refugee, when it's come to reset in the countries, finding all the challenge on their way, and then it's come to the trauma, the new trauma coming, all of that. It's all about the system. if I can maybe show, but I have a lot to say on this, of course. But I think if the listeners or you guys get the message about it, was very clear. Just for the message for that journalist who would say he was mentioning about Iraq, I think he didn't read the history that Iraq was a first civilizations. That's the thing, that these people forget that we were the one who put the law in this world. Hammurabi, read that law. But it is. I just call them ignorance. That's the things when it's coming on these people and judging us between who is civilized and who is not.
Yeah.
We have reached the wall, but unfortunately, the things has been turned off. We are now least power, so we have to flee, and other countries and others will seek that we are not educated and blah blah blah.
I want to touch on what you said, not educated part a little bit. Because there's that trope which you saw after the end of the Cold War, where you see like a person driving a cab in the UK and they're from Russia or Poland or something, and they're like, "Oh, I used to be a nuclear physicist." So that kind of idea. I have heard that it's very hard for people who are professionals in their previous country to actually get work in New Zealand in those same fields. So could you guys comment on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just go a little bit, then Marieke, you feel free to add on. I will come through an experience that, why we got so far, I will just take it. My experience, when I come from with a good English, good educational background, but it was not easy to find jobs here when I first year resettled. I mean, I'm taking the experience that someone who's ready from the English, who's ready from a culture, from every side that tick the boxes of the society. And I still find it very, 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 very difficult until I get to a meaningful job. I sacrifice too many hours, too many days and months until like after a year and a half, then I kind of get starting getting some recognized jobs and etc. I'm following. Now I'm a good position, I can say, in terms of jobs. But this is one example. But one of the jobs I was doing, I was community talent manager for one of the organizations. We were looking after those refugee backgrounds who have a qualification and finding them jobs. So I had around 50 in my list, and there was doctors on it, engineers and law, all of them. But unfortunately, most of them were taxi drivers and bus drivers. So the thing was here, these people I find too much challenge to present their skills. No one have opened the door for them. No one have given them that chance to at least try. Always telling them you don't have New Zealand experience. How you can get this New Zealand experience if you don't give the at least first chance? That's what's always happening, and it's still happening. So many of them will, they have a families, they need to survive, so they will change their jobs. And that affected my family, who my uncle and other who come, they become, jobs is a job. I'm not criticizing about cleaning and stuff. Some people are really happy, like my brother. He was an economist, but then now he has his cleaning business. But the thing is, the opportunity have been shot on their face. I think if they just open that space, giving the opportunity, this experience will, I'm 100% sure that these people are loyal, they will improve themselves. I think the end of the story is everyone deserves a chance. There is that opportunity to be given. So then the successful one, they will continue. The other ones, of course, they can at least be a reference. At least they say, I tried, but it didn't really work in my field. I will change. But fortunately, we didn't see this in New Zealand. Marieke?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that was a really strong, theme throughout. I mean, most of the research I've done over the years, not just my PhD, but really the acknowledgement. I had a theme based on a really powerful quote from one of the practitioners I interviewed who had actually the experience of resettling in New Zealand originally as a refugee. And she had this beautiful statement around, when I asked her, what would you love New Zealanders to know? And her response was, this is not paradise. Like, people expect us to be grateful. They expect it to be so easy for us. We're safe. But actually, this is not paradise. And, when we look at a lot of the distress that people are experiencing while resettling here, it's not necessarily because of the awful things that happened to them during the course of becoming a refugee. It's actually around the challenges of trying to create a new life in a new country and culture where there's actually so little opportunity and often hostility. And yeah, it's incredible in terms of actually the limited options to follow your aspirations and actually gain like any employment, let alone aspirational employment. And we often find that individuals who may be clinically depressed and really struggling, once they obtain employment, their well-being completely transforms. Yeah. And so, you know, as someone who becomes a refugee, that process is characterized by so much loss, you know, you have your loss of your land, of loved ones, of the life that you lived, and really part of that is actually around the status that you had and the identity that you had. And unfortunately, a lot of individuals are never able to completely reclaim that.
So recently there's been some changes in the immigration policy in New Zealand, and that's basically, in short, trying to cut down the immigration number. I'm not very familiar with the work that's been done with refugees and how many refugees New Zealand has been taking on a yearly basis. Do you think that will affect the amount of refugees that New Zealand takes as well?
Absolutely. Thanks for that question. I mean, one thing to acknowledge is that, you know, the global pandemic had huge repercussions for refugee resettlement, and that, you know, our borders were shut. And so we didn't actually fulfill our obligations to the UNHCR. You know, our annual quota was halted. We didn't receive individuals seeking asylum. And so we weren't awarding convention refugee status. You know, there are a number of things that actually prevented New Zealand from actually, receiving and resettling individuals here for the last few years. So that's definitely thrown a spanner in the works. But I think if we take a step back, I think it is important to acknowledge that the government has attempted several initiatives over the last few years. So they really did acknowledge the incredible advocacy that was led by Murdoch-Stevens around doubling the quota. So the quota did double eventually. They've also implemented a refugee advisory group. So they're currently recruiting individuals who have that lived experience to become a part of a panel that will help inform the revision of the refugee resettlement strategy. And they also have a pilot going on around giving the opportunity for community organisations to actually sponsor resettling individuals and families themselves as an additional route to resettlement within New Zealand. And so there is this initiative underway that can potentially resettle up to 50 additional individuals a year, which I think is important to acknowledge and is progress.
Yeah. It's my turn, I think. Okay. Yeah, adding on that, what Marieke have mentioned about the progress. Yeah, I see that progress it's there. That's a fact that government have took these steps. But in my perspective, my opinion, there is more progress need to be done. There is more things need to be done. Just before I comment a little further, I need to claim it or make a disclaimer that I'm talking on my personal hat. All of this podcast is my personal hat. All is my opinion, not those associated to any workplace that I work or represent communities or groups. Why? So I can be free.
Don't worry, we have the same disclaimer at the start of our podcast that everybody here is.
Because it's a very important question, Louisa, what you have asked and what my colleague added about progress. And I agree with this progress, but in my perspective, I see it's very slow. Mm-hmm. And also when we talk about those initiatives, we have to also talk who's in the power on this initiative. It's always about that. If you wanna do something different, the community have spoken. There is many years now refugees coming to New Zealand. There is a lot of skills there. They could be appointed to these kind of positions or leading this initiative so they can give it meaningful participation, meaningful inclusion of this community into policy decision makings. And otherwise, if this progress been like even in Dublin Quarter, I'm like someone like me who come from this backgrounds of refugees. Say would you agree? I would agree, but I think here it was not done in a way that government ready for it. Okay, so here people say, but they doubled, yes, and I need to triple it as well, but not in a way when we are not ready for it. People say, are you against it? See, here's the message. People do not get my message interpreted wrongly. I want people to come in, but I am one of them, how we are settling here, how other problems is facing us. From housing, from employment, from health, from etc., etc. So why we would create double trauma for the people when you don't have the real housing and stuff, etc. It's not my problem when we come here, you open we are thankful for opening those doors to us. Then you give us a home, then we always being labeled in the media and stuff. You are taking our homes, you are taking our lands, jobs and stuff. That's where we are not feeling safe. We want a safety. So I think that doubling quota, I a little bit find that first the government did not complete that order to take it. They blame it for the COVID. I'm not sure. There was others people coming back. So what was the point? Actually, they should be more necessary to take them quickly if it was COVID, if they really wanted to save life and also save them from the illness. So the question mark a lot here, why have been delayed? Why? We had also hotels and etc. That's something. And then all other initiative the government is doing, it's really need meaningful participation with the real representations of the communities. They need to do a little bit harder work to talk to the communities, consult very well with the key players, not just the old partners, not just the old organizations who talk behalf of these people. So that, they could be included in the process, of course, but I mean, they need to really reach out to the communities. They will find out different picture. They will find out better ways, save the monies, save also the alternative solutions. There's a family can tell you, we 6 people we can live in a 1-2 bedroom home. See, this solution will not be given by the organizations. Organizations just want to make it harder, longer, etc., etc. So I think my message here is there's a progress, but that progress needs to be empowered by refugees included in the system. Because when you do something for the targeted this group, it's cool to have this group as well involved in the system to know what work for them. And plus, don't forget, we are talking about people that they are also themselves diverse. So we're talking diversity within diverse communities. So it's very important to have them voice heard, to have them also part of power or decision making to make a better resettlement in New Zealand.
Awesome. That was great. Thanks again, you guys, for coming on and sharing work and lived experiences. And because most of our podcasts do cover sort of heavy material, we always like to end with like a short set of rapid fire questions, just to have a bit of consistency on this podcast. We don't have a sponsor for this section yet. Maybe the New Zealand government can sponsor us after this. Maybe not after some of the things Kodrean said, but we'll see. All right. So without further ado, the way we'll go about it is we'll ask a question and then you guys can alternate responses. And so, Louisa, if you want to ask the first few.
Summer or winter?
Summer.
Summer.
Movies or TV series?
Books.
Oh, look, if I was sticking to script, I would pick TV over movies, but I would also prefer books.
Okay. Well, if your life were a book, what genre would it belong to?
Adventure.
Traveler. Same adventure.
I'm like, if I was honest, if it was TV or movie, it would be drama.
Morning, noon, or night?
Night.
Night.
Cats or dogs?
I adore both, but gun to my head, cats.
Dogs. Little spicy in the office.
What's your weapon of choice?
My body. So I've been doing martial arts since I was 5 years old. And so I know how to handle myself. And I actually also read something really beautiful the other day about weaponizing one's privilege. And so I would like to think that that's something I have also done in my work.
Could be my pen. Yeah.
Your radio show?
Yeah. Actually, yeah. Let me say it. Radio show. Yeah, that's right.
Which superpower would you like to have?
Aroha.
Aroha, yeah. I think...
Like superpower, having aroha in everything. Because everything... How much we disagree should somehow we come in a common agree.
Absolutely. And if it's not too much to ask, I would love the ability to just extract someone's suffering. I think pain in and of itself is often quite important, but this concept of prolonged suffering really bothers me. And as much as it may put us out of a job, I think the ability to extract suffering would be incredible.
Yeah.
Is a hot dog a sandwich?
I don't know.
I don't like it, so I don't think so.
What's your favourite food?
Dolma. It's Middle Eastern food. Or biryani.
I'm a sucker for tacos. Anything Mexican, but tacos.
There's a new one open, I think, Cuba Street. I need to taste it. It's good.
Maybe they can sponsor us. The new taco place.
We'll give you some tips of sponsoring.
What is the worst thing you've ever paid money for?
Oh, bribes at borders whilst travelling. So annoying. It's like a necessary evil of travelling in certain parts of the world. But I resent it.
No comment. I don't know.
Okay. Anything ridiculous which someone has tricked you into believing or doing?
Could be my peace, which is there's no peace.
Yeah, I feel like you and I could get so philosophical about it, and it would get so depressing.
Yeah.
Next question.
Next question. No comment.
If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
I honestly feel like I would make the most of living anywhere, but I actually adore living in Aotearoa, and I feel like after the pandemic, I've developed this new appreciation for our country, and I'm quite satisfied here for now.
For me, I think I may not in that level now to say which in the world I need to travel more to then decide.
Okay, is there a quote or saying which people say which you think is complete bullshit?
So one line that comes to me is like, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me, or, something along those lines. And I think just in terms of what we've been discussing today, actually words can be incredibly painful and have incredibly profound effects. So I call bullshit.
Good.
I just agree with that.
Easy.
Yes, right.
What's legal but still feels illegal?
Oh, mezcal. It's a smoked tequila, a Mexican liqueur, and I love it.
Why does it feel illegal?
It's just goddamn delicious. And it has an incredibly high alcohol content.
All right, so the next question is perfect for you. What type of researcher is most likely to win a drinking contest, and why is it you?
Wow. In terms of my own ethnography and observational analysis, psychologists and psychiatrists can drink. Yeah, but I'm not quite sure how much I can generalize that.
Okay, last two questions. Okay. If you were not doing this, what would you be doing?
I would be a Muay Thai fighter.
For me?
Yeah.
I would be in Hollywood.
I love it.
I love acting,
No.
Sounds good. So, this is also doubles as Kodrean's audition tape. If anybody needs Assyrian actors for various roles in Hollywood, hit him up.
There we go.
Okay, the final question, and we want both your answers for this. If you could give us one piece of advice to leave with, what would it be?
Do you know what? I just want to be like, don't be a dick. But I'm going to like,
Just say,
Perfect.
don't be dude.
That's
Yeah.
perfect.
Don't be dude. Can you put dude?
yeah, like,
Don't be a.
yeah. Can you-
100%.
okay.
What about you, Kodrean? Do you have anything more profound or?
Just complete the dude. That would be cool. Yeah.
Because I just
It's
think
okay.
as much as I can, like, you know, in other contexts, I've like waxed philosophical about the importance of critically reflecting on our assumptions and this, that, the other. Like, it actually just boils down to don't be a dick.
Yeah, it really
Like,
does. I so agree.
So I
with
just
that.
feel like,
Easy. All right. Thanks again, guys. One more thing. If people wanted to contact you, how could they get in touch with you?
oh, well, thank you so much for creating this space for us. And in terms of contacting me, at least, I'll pass on my details that will be in the show notes. And yeah, if you just want to Google my name as well, several things will come up, including my PhD, which is open access to anyone who may be remotely interested.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me on this show. It was really cool opportunity to talk about a lot of stuff, and contacting me as well. Just Google my name, or you can visit our page, Voice of Aroha. It's a radio show, so you can find it on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. Just go for Voice of Aroha. That's our radio show. You can find us there.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, guys.
Awesome. Thank you.
And thanks everyone for listening. If you want to get in contact with us, you can find us on our Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all of them at The Smooth Brain Society. And until then, take care and don't be a dick.